All right, everyone. I want to thank you for coming out on this beautiful but warm St. Louis summer day. And I do want to start off by saying that our thoughts and prayers are with the people in Orlando. I hate to see things like this continually happen, but it does, and hopefully we can get it to stop. Anyway, we are here today to talk about the Roadmap to Entrepreneurship. So this event is the first of its kind, and we're hoping we can turn this into an annual event to allow the community to learn about the Missouri Venture Forum and our mission and all the resources that are available in the city and county of St. Louis and in the region, St. Charles County and over in Illinois, for people who want to start companies, who may be transitioning from large companies, looking for their next opportunity. And that's what this whole day is about. So I really want to thank you for coming out today. I think you're going to learn a lot of very interesting things. We have a lot of great panelists, and we have a great keynote to start the conference off with, and then we have a good, if not great, keynote to wrap the conference up. And then we're going to have a reception this evening after the second keynote. So please stick around for that, and it's just an opportunity to network with the people that you see and hear from today. So I want to talk a little bit about the Missouri Venture Forum. Missouri Venture Forum has been around since 1985. It's one of these little treasures in St. Louis that if you haven't heard about it, you should take the time to learn about it. It's a voluntary member organization, so everyone who works for the organization is a volunteer. There is an annual membership fee, and there's information. There's a membership table out front, and I would invite you all to take a look and consider becoming a member or the organization. We do 10 breakfasts a month, and if you just saw these recent articles out of the Washington Monthly, a lot of the companies that you're reading about or hearing about in St. Louis actually speak at our breakfasts. And then we also have investors speak at our breakfasts and other people that support the ecosystem in St. Louis. So coming up, our next breakfast is August 5th, 2016. It's held at the Moto Museum down by St. Louis University, right off of Olive Avenue. And it's going to be Chris Ruzicka of Tech Shop. So Tech Shop is opening in August, and Chris is going to be speaking literally like 2 weeks before Tech Shop opens. So it's going to be a really interesting presentation because he's getting ready to open this new facility right on Forest Park Avenue in the heart of Cortex. And then in September, we have Brian Cohen, who is the founder of Murmurization. Murmurization? Am I saying that right? Thank you, Murmuration. Anyway. Brian's going to be speaking to this new event, and we're excited about that as well, and that's going to be on September 2nd. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Robrt Fraley. So, first, let me say, I want to thank Monsanto and our other sponsors you see up here, Civic Progress, Brian Cave, Venture Cafe, Mosaic Project, and then all of our supporters from the community who, once they heard about what we were trying to do here today, they came on board to provide help and assistance and to support and to advertise and promote this event into the community. So Monsanto did a significant contribution to get this event going, and we want to thank them for that, and as for our other sponsors as well. So Dr. Robrt Fraley is the Executive Vice President and CTO of Monsanto. Dr. Fraley is has been with the company for more than 30 years and currently oversees the company's global technology division, which includes plant breeding, plant biotechnology, ag biologics, ag microbiomes, precision agriculture, and crop protection. Dr. Fraley's honors include a World Food Prize laureate, the National Medal of Technology from President Clinton, the National Academy of Sciences Award for Industrial Application of Science for his work on crop improvement, among many, many other recognitions. And so we're very honored to have him be our opening keynote today. Dr. Fraley.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I was a little late there. Jim was taking me a tour of the facility, and every time I come here, it takes a little bit longer to see what's going on. So great to see the expansion and the new wing and everything. I guess you'll all get a chance to look around sometime today. So take full advantage of it. It's pretty cool. It's always great to be back here. A lot of great memories from this place, and Matt was really kind. I've been at Monsanto for 35 years, so I started there in 1981, and some of those memories go back to when the Danforth Center was just getting started. So back in the late 90s, a lot of the thought leaders in the community, including Bill Danforth, Mark Wrighton at Monsanto, Virginia Weldon, and Hendrik Verify and others thought, this would be great to be able to get, a community effort focused on agriculture and plant biotechnology. We had a pretty strong program in healthcare here in St. Louis, but plants needed a little bit of help, and this tract of land was one that Monsanto had saved for a new research center, which we decided to build out in Chesterfield instead. So that and a little cash and a lot of support from the Danforths have put us on the map. And what's so cool about it is, again, from the beginning, I've watched it expand and evolve, and not only in terms of the number of researchers and the size, but now the scope and the impact that the Danforth Center has had. And I think one of the reasons for me it's so personally cool is what the Danforth Center tries to achieve is very similar to what Monsanto's focused on. We both are unique in the sense that we're basically 100% focused on agriculture, improving technology for farmers that ultimately benefits society from a point of view of food security and improving our environment. And it's great to see the momentum here. And we're just talking with Jim. Would you say almost 35 companies now located here on this in this spot? I mean, that's unbelievable. That's we dreamed about that back in the 90s. So it's great to see it happen. So the original idea was a focus on agriculture and plant science, and take advantage not only of the strengths of some of the local companies and universities, but we have huge agribusinesses, and when you think about it, if you draw that 500-mile circle around St. Louis, you cover the bulk of the most productive agricultural land in the world. So that makes a lot of sense. But now the diversity of startups takes us across IT, takes us across the food space, and education and communication are all part of the mix. And so that's exciting to see. You mentioned the article that just came out in the Washington Monthly. Have you had a chance to read it? If you want to see a quick copy of it, you can just follow me on Twitter. So if you do @Robrt Fraley, ROBB FRALEY, I just tweeted on it this morning. And the thing that the article emphasized that I think is so true is it talked about all of the efforts across the community to create the entrepreneurial environment, and a big part of that in the early days, and obviously with startups is always a big part of it, is funding. But you look at now what we have in terms of our networks and our funding sources and capabilities, it's been dramatically improved. And then the incubators provide such an opportunity to get those those gems of ideas appropriately positioned and nourished. And the region, I think, has done a great job. I mean, to the point where now we're attracting startups from all over the country, and that's pretty remarkable. Now, to be fair and balanced, it said we still have a little work to do to compete with Silicon Valley, but we've come a long way, and so many of you in the room here have contributed to that. And I guess I would argue that what we're doing and the logic, the industrial logic behind why this was important for St. Louis, why it was important to have this additional attractive magnet for new talent and new ideas is more important than ever. The challenge of food security is an enormous one. You all know the demographics as well as I do. 10 billion people will be joining us by 2050. I always like to pause there and make the point that 2050 is only 34 years away. It's going to happen just like that. So there's no time to waste, and there's a sense of urgency to achieve it from a food security perspective. But I think increasingly what we're seeing is that technology that drives sustainable intensification, the ability to produce more on each unit of land, to produce more with less inputs is the key long-term to enhancing our environment and making sure that those 10 billion people in 2050 not only have a food-secure world, but a world where, you know, we've reclaimed many of the soils and landscapes that you know, the efficiencies that we gain in agriculture will give us the opportunity. So I'll just take a moment and trace a little bit backwards in history and make a couple of connections. So I joined Monsanto in '81. Had the opportunity to work with Mary Dale Chilton, Roger Beachy at Washington University. By the '82, '83 time frame, you know, the St. Louis research labs, both at Monsanto and Washington University, had figured out the ways to put genes into plants, and that you know, that opened the door for the application of biotechnology in agriculture, which was my dream. You know, I started out in life as a farm boy, a few hours from here. Grew up on a farm a few hours south of Chicago. Was able to work through my college at the University of Illinois, and then had the incredible opportunity of doing my postdoc out at University of California at San Francisco. And it was an amazing experience because my lab was on the 12th floor with my main professor. Herb Boyer's lab was on the 10th floor. Bill Rudder was on the 9th floor, and so the people who created the biotech world, you know, were right there. And at that point in time, the tools for plants were far behind. So being able to, you know, create the opportunity for breakthroughs that were created here in St. Louis back in the '80s have been, you know, transformational for the world. You know, today biotech crops are grown in 30 countries around the world. Here in the U.S., if you look at the major row crops from corn and soybeans and cotton to sugar beets and canola, probably 95% of the acres, you know, rely on a biotechnology trait to help farmers protect their crops from insects or from weeds. And about a quarter of the world's farmland now uses this technology to produce better crops. Now, that's not to say there haven't been a few challenges along the way, and I'll come back and touch those. But you know, you look at the analysis that's been done. This technology has helped farmers improve their yields, dramatically reduce pesticides, and importantly, improve their profitability. And that's why there's been such prolific, unparalleled adoption of these tools. The other thing that I remember back then, and you know, I can't exactly pretend to you that being a small biotech company in a Monsanto was the same as a startup, but in many ways, I think it was almost as challenging because we were competing with time and resources from established, you know, agribusinesses and pharmaceutical businesses, and I recognize from that the importance of a couple of things that are so critical that I would just leave you with as advice. And the first is the importance of taking risk. I mean, obviously. Having a big impact, spending your time and passion, it needs to be something that's worthwhile. You know, take the risk and think big. The second thing, and the thing that still I see today, is the importance of the right team. And you know, it's probably the most important decision you'll make as leaders as you think about your startup. And you know, many of the folks that were our core team back in the 1980s when we were, you know, a handful of scientists working on petunias, we're still with us today, and that's pretty key. And then the other thing, of course, is a clear strategy in terms of how are you going to turn science and technology into products that matter and reach the marketplace. And here, having that commercial support system was really key for us. And again, that's the importance of the incubators here. So whether your long-term goal is licensing, whether it's a standalone path, whether you're going to be a partner, or whether you plan for that acquisition, you know, all of those are important to have that clear path. Let me just come back to a couple other points that before I close and open it up for questions that I'd like to leave you with. which I think comes out of the, kind of looking at it, from my perspective as CTO of Monsanto. So one of the questions I get a lot is, how much are you focused externally? How important is it? So I'm really proud of the fact that we're a large company able to, dedicate, $1.5 billion of R&D every year. I'm proud of the fact that we're expanding Chesterfield Village, and within another 12 or 18 months, we'll have 2,000 scientists located on that site, and another 3,000 around the world developing and breeding crops. But the number one thing I realize is there's so many bright people and so many great ideas that you have to have a consummate external focus. And so from the very beginning, I can remember when we were first working on those petunias, at one time when I would be going to meetings, I think we would have more consultants and advisors than we had employees. So a strong external focus is key. We track companies from individual professors to startups to mid and large-sized companies all around the world for collaborations, and it's key and vital to us. About 25% of our R&D budget in the end goes to support partnerships, startups, and investments, and so it's really an absolute consummate focus. And as I look back, I mean, our entry into genomics was driven by a key partnership with Millennium Pharmaceuticals back in Boston. We're getting ready to launch a brand new technology for weed control called Extend, which is a trait for creating tolerance to an agrochemical herbicide called dicamba that we licensed from the University of Nebraska, and that will be a major breakthrough. And we've just announced deals in the last few years with Novozymes, a Danish company in microbes, so we can study that microbiome, and lots of opportunities. But external focus is key, and I think what I see as I travel around, there's an explosion now of breakthrough ideas and innovation. At the highest level, basically the way I describe it when I'm talking to folks is, we're basically seeing the advances in biology and the advances in data science converge at every level. Everything we do that's powered in breeding and genomics is powered by an incredible database. Our field testing now is all powered by sensors and satellites and predictions that enable us to get and tap the optimal data for making decisions. And then the opportunity to understand the variables in that field. A few years ago, we had the opportunity to acquire a San Francisco company called the Climate Corporation that had mapped every field in the United States, all 30 million of them, and then had gone back and looked at the yield and weather histories for each of those fields for the last 30 years so they could understand the basics of what the relationship was between the crop, the weather, and a specific field, so that you could build models for companies, for growers, that would give them information so that they could make their decisions. I mentioned I grew up on a farm. I can remember my dad spending hours thinking about which field to plant with which seed, with which fertilizer, with all of those decisions that farmers make. And if you add them all up, farmers make 40 or 50 decisions every year on each of their fields that impact the potential for yield. Each one of those decisions can now be digitized based on a great understanding of the genetics, an incredible understanding of the soil and the field, and that's changing farming. If you think about it, when we breed crops, we're now breeding them with the complete knowledge of every gene in that crop, and that's the power to breed gene by gene. And when a farmer's planting their farm, it's no longer a farm, it's no longer a field, it's a meter by meter grid that talks about the impact of differences in the slope of the field, or organic matter, or cation capacity, and they're planting that field like you would approach the logic with an inkjet printer to, again, optimize every foot of that field. And so the combination of biology and data science is driving that next green revolution, and that's a green revolution that we're going to need to not only feed 10 billion people, but do it appropriately, do it in the face of climate change, do it in the face of increasing competition for water, and do it in such a way that we can improve yield so dramatically that we can take hundreds of millions of acres out of production that probably should have never been farmed, and let them return to wetlands or to forests, or as Jim was showing me out here, maybe some prairie grasses. So that's a dream that still excites me every morning when I come into work. And the other important part of these tools is these come as close to being scale neutral as any innovation ever created by man. You think of all of those advances of biology, what do they end up? They end up with a better seed. And every farmer in the world, no matter whether they're a Missouri or an Illinois farmer or a farmer in India or Africa, knows what to do with the seed. So the ability to transfer the benefits are enormous. And obviously, while done very differently, the advances in data science create that same opportunity. It may not be the computer in the tractor, and I always kid folks to, who don't realize this, but the average tractor, whether it's red paint or green paint, has more computer horsepower in it than the first spaceships that went to the moon. So we're talking about very sophisticated capability to program and automate farming. But the cell phone across India and across Africa becomes an important leveling out of information access, whether it's agronomy, whether it's which village is paying the highest price, or how to get microcredit and cut out the loan shark in the village, all which drive incredible ability to drive technology innovation and adoption and level the playing field. So those were the comments that I wanted to make. But I always like to add one more thought, because it's something that I've learned over the years, and some would argue learned a bit painfully, and that's how important that the role is for each one of us involved in science, involved in agriculture, involved in any aspect of the food chain, to be able to articulate and communicate that need for innovation, to the public and to the policymakers. I can use GMOs as a case study for what to do and what not to do. And, I can tell you, as a company, we were really excited in the mid-90s when we got those first biotech approvals after having gotten, all the federal government approvals. And we put all of our time and effort on communicating to farmers, and given the adoption we've seen, that communication has gone well. But we didn't focus nearly enough on the communication to the public and to the policymakers, and we're seeing some of the pushback on that still today. But that same pushback is building on new platforms like microbes, pushback on gene editing technologies, new types of crop chemical products, and other innovations in the ag and food chain. The reality of it is that in this country, 1% of the population is directly involved with food production, 99% is not. And so those of us who are involved and intend to be involved have that additional challenge of reaching out. And so, one of the things I have come to learn is that while the science itself is absolutely essential to create the kind of products that are needed, that in itself it's insufficient. And we need to pay as much attention to the communication aspect and building support and understanding as we do in inventing the products. And here I think in particular, you're all very technologically adept. Social media has such a major role to play, because when you're 1% reaching out to the other 99%, we need to amplify our messages, and that becomes key. So those were the comments I wanted to make in introduction. I guess we have a few minutes to do a couple of questions if there's anything that I can cover that would be of interest. So thanks for the time, thanks for being here, and should be a terrific day. Sure. Brave person in the middle with a yellow shirt asking that first question. You know, I hate to tell you this, or I hate to tell you this, but Jim will be relieved. The way I usually always get the first question is I would reach over to Jim and say, pull that $20 bill out of your wallet. And, you know, the first person who raises their hand, you were so damn quick, I couldn't even get there.
I'll do it.
All right. Sure.
You know, you hear so much about in different things in the food industry, you know, GMOs, gluten this and gluten that, and it's like, what do you believe? You know, it's so much, it's like, is it more marketing stuff that it's like, GMOs are bad? And I look at it, one of my favorite berries is a boysenberry. Well, boysenberry doesn't just grow. Walter Knott combined a couple of berries and came up with something else. If you buy a fruit tree today, the roots are different than the trunk.
Great point.
You know, see, we've been doing this stuff all through history. Why is it so different today?
Let me take, I mean, I could spend hours, and I have spent days on this topic in the past, but I will take it from just two cuts. So first of all, from the science side, you're absolutely right. I give a lot of talks where I basically make the point that, you know, everything we grow and consume in this country is genetically modified. In fact, if you actually go back to, if you were a pilgrim coming into the U.S., the native crops in the U.S. were strawberries, sunflowers, and a few nuts and berries. That was it. Everything else we grow came from somewhere else, was genetically modified and adapted for here, using all kinds of genetic modification methods for mutagenesis, for selection, for grafting. And what even makes it more interesting today from the science perspective is now that we've unleashed the knowledge of all of the genomes that have been sequenced across the fungal, the microbial, the plant space is, you know, again, back in the early 80s when we were moving genes, we thought between species at the first time. What we've realized now is that nature turns out that she's been a pretty good genetic engineer, and there are now just countless examples of the crops that we enjoy today were, you know, contained foreign genes. You know, the latest one was the sweet potato, that actually all commercial sweet potato varieties actually contain agrobacterium genes very similar to the vectors that we used 30 years ago. So all foods are genetically modified, and the irony of the pushback on the GMO and the gene editing technologies are we're doing it more precisely, certainly more safely than it's ever been done in the history of the world. So it's harder to understand from the science side. I just tweeted another article this morning that basically made the point, in the end, this is all marketing. I mean, I can remember 25 years ago, you know, you couldn't go to a grocery store without having reduced cholesterol or cholesterol-free, and it got to the point where you had cholesterol-free bananas, which, you know, shows you how silly it gets. But, you know, that's only to be outdone by GMO-free water and some of the things we're enjoying today. I think on the other end of it, I mean, we clearly need, you know, a federally mandated approach to food labeling that makes scientific sense, because there's no one in the world that can, you know, and you can see this in lots of surveys and studies, who can explain to you the difference between, you know, organic, natural, and GMO, and do it sensibly. And so we're at a really weird stage where it's all marketing, and that's the key. And you can add gluten-free and many other things to that list. So we're a big proponent of if we're going to label these foods, they should be done at a national level. It should be done with a science basis. I think that would key, and it would solve a lot of today's challenges. Yeah, in the back. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You talked about how you doubled down in talking about the GMO space and also about collaboration. Have you seen your focus on social media sort of grease the wheels for future collaborations and entries into the entrepreneur market?
Yeah, I would, so I think the gist of your question is what are we seeing, in terms of outreach and connectivity? An explosion. I've probably given 2 or 3 talks, one in Boston, one in the Silicon Valley. The hundreds of startup companies interested in the ag space, either driven from, the biology side, the microbe side, the data science side, the sensor side, the big data management side. A huge amount of innovation, coming into the space, and I think the ability to connect and communicate is key. So we put a lot of focus into how we achieve that outreach and that awareness, because we want to be the preferred licensor or acquirer or partner of companies, and I think that's going to be increasingly key in the future. So I think it's really important, and I think it really bodes well for the interest in the folks in this room. I mean, there's an explosion of innovation. There's an absolute desire for the innovation and the creativity, both from companies and from growers. Sure, over here.
Yes, we were talking about the converged breeding and data science. I like that, but what would be the best strategy to bridge the gap between the farmer's experience and our data science? Because sometimes we may challenge their years of experience.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and it's so the question, if you couldn't hear it, was I talked about the convergence of biology and data science, and then I think rightfully pointed out how do we bridge that gap. We've done it in multiple ways. I mean, a big part of the logic for acquiring the Climate Corporation was they already had 250 data scientists and mathematicians and statisticians that we could bring in who were grounded in the ag space. We do a lot of cross-training. We do a lot of partnering with smaller companies. I can tell you that probably the greatest challenge we have as we think about talent for the future. In the world of plant breeding, we probably have we have 500 plant breeders. Probably a quarter of those can retire at any time. We're looking, for hundreds of plant breeders that not only have the background in agronomy, but can understand the algorithms that our history now with markers and genome-wide sequencing predicts that we need to make, as we change into the future. I don't think it's any different than some of the challenges we've seen in other industries. I mean, fortunately in St. Louis, we have a pretty strong, data science and IT community, and but it's one that I think is, both a strength of what we can do here, but it's also a challenge to do it right with the right people. So, the talent pool is still one that we focus on. I mentioned the convergence between and it's impacted every part of how we do our research. But the other really important aspect of the data science tools is we believe, as we look in the future, that the grower, just like any other consumer, wants to have that integrated experience with their purchase. So if you go onto Amazon and order an item, you can track that item. You know exactly where it's at. As you order more and more, your profile becomes built. Amazon suggests recommendations for you, and it's the same thing whether it's your choice of who you purchase from for goods and services or music or your videos. Growers the same way. They've got 50 decisions to make. They would like someone to help integrate all those decisions so that the seed and the 50,000 genes and the traits that are added are targeted exactly for the field, and the seed treatments that we're using are tailored for the exact soil and upcoming weather conditions for that year, and that the satellites and the imagery and the sensors are tracking that crop so that every few days they can get the information, and then finally make recommendations on when to harvest, which field to harvest the first. What about the market? What's going on a global basis? That can all be integrated together, and I think that's a powerful opportunity to move, farming and agriculture into the modern world as we both digitize and integrate this very powerfully. Sure.
We're at an entrepreneur conference here, and I'm sure Monsanto is keeping a close watch of what technology is moving and looking at the startup company that they think they need to acquire. So I want to pick your brain and find out what you look for in a startup company that you want to acquire from Monsanto.
Well, we do, and I would also, we have a person who heads a lot of our acquisition and review of startup companies, John Hamer. So I'd be happy to connect you with John. We do, we have both teams that are tracking our own data through patents and publications, and then John and his team are involved with a number of venture capital funds. I think last year we looked at something like 2,000 different startups. We made investments in about 20. Typically the space that, given who we are and what we're looking for, the space that we're largely looking at, I mean, we're always interested in the next gene or biology-based advance. So genes, microbes are a big part of it. The opportunity to accelerate the data science tools, and there we tend to look at companies who have advanced sensor technology, advanced algorithms, whether it's satellite displays or sensors that we think we can work with equipment companies to mount on the farm equipment and drive that information flow. So data science plays pretty prominently in that pool of companies that we're looking at for the future. But as I always tell folks, I love all the good ideas. So don't feel bucketed in one or two categories. And I'll give you John's name afterwards, or his phone number. One more, and then we'll get back on to the schedule. One more question. And again, I really appreciate the audience. You've been fun, and it's been great to do this. Sure.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, how you doing? I can barely see you, but I recognize that voice, yeah.
One of the challenges you talked about in the beginning, you said there's three things that startup needs. They need to be able to take risks, they need to be a team, they need to be a strategy. One area that I think is also really critical is intellectual property. Intellectual property today is not like it was 20 years ago. We're actually focusing now a lot more on naturally occurring technology and naturally occurring phenomena. So how does a startup company deal with those intellectual property challenges?
Great question, and I should add, I mean, one of the strengths of clearly the region here and the folks in this room is, and I recognize Sharon, and I saw Sonny back in behind you, and I know a few other folks. I mean, there's a huge amount of talent and experience in this region, and so I think that plays very adeptly to how we pick the right leaders, how we build the right team, how we build those business models for success. On the intellectual property, great question. I think the simple answer is it just means you have to be more creative. So even if it's a naturally occurring microbe or it's a gene editing system, there's usually a hook that enables some type of intellectual property protection, and those, as you point out, are going to have to adapt and evolve with the new systems. But I tell you, increasingly in a lot of these situations, the best path and the best route is speed, because in some cases you will you'll wait too long or you'll be too uncertain. I mean, we can all wait on gene editing between the fight between the Broad Institute and their counterpart, to see how intellectual property solves with this technology, or we move with other systems. And I think the same thing is going to be true of a lot of the microbes and other products. And so I think that speaks to a business strategy that's based on speed, and that's maybe where the licensing and the partnering to create capability and look for the ways in which you can protect technology through through more of an integrated solution approach. And I think that will be a key part of that side of the innovation story. So thanks again, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Fraley. A couple of things I kind of overlooked. One, I'm Matthew Kulig, president of the Missouri Venture Forum, so I did not introduce myself. Exactly. Kind of a big oversight. Number two, I'm proud of everyone in this room because I didn't even have to tell you to turn off your cell phones. You just did it. So please keep your cell phones off during the conference. Three, there's a schedule of event that you should find, or it's going to be in your booklet. And so here is the schedule for the day. The next panel, the first panel, is going to be in this room. And then at 3 o'clock, we actually split into two panels, with one panel being in here, and then the other panel is going to be up on the first floor in the new theater that they just built and opened. So that panel is in the, I guess you would call that beige color in the theater. So just take a look at which panel you want to be in, and then if you have a question, what I'd like to do is have any of the Missouri Venture Forum members please stand up. Please stand up. Thank you. So feel free to grab any of these people with questions and ask them questions. They'll be able to help you. And then the table up front, if you have questions, there's Pat and Ron up there, and they'll also be glad to help you. I want to thank our sponsors again, Monsanto. Monsanto is a very important part of the startup ecosystem in St. Louis, along with Civic Progress, Brian K., Venture Cafe, and Mosaic Project. Our supporters, who I didn't read off before, but I feel a need to. So when they heard about the event, they were very excited about this because they really want to support the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, but also diversity in the ecosystem, which is something we all need to look at. So the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, Office of the Mayor, City of St. Louis, the St. Louis Regional Chamber, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Asian Chamber of Commerce, International Institute, the STL VentureWorks, I-10, Square One, Idea Labs, and Full Circle. And there's members of those organizations here today, all of them. And we want to thank them so much for supporting this event. And again, our goal is to hopefully turn this into an annual event so that we can continually educate the region about the ecosystem. And so I do want to just end before we take a break by saying the Missouri Venture Forum has a mission, and our mission has been, to basically educate and help to serve entrepreneurs, those leading the growth of early stage businesses through peer networking, topical educational events like the one today, and provide access to capital resource where available. So the ecosystem in St. Louis has changed a lot. There's a lot more capital looking to work now. There's a lot of programs out there, and the panels today are going to really go into that and dive into it so that you can all learn about the resources that are there. And they're also going to be discussing such things as IP issues, appropriately enough. So we have a panel on legal issues and IP issues, accounting issues. So I think it's going to be a very, very good event, and I hope you can stick around for the whole event. And then the reception is at 7 p.m. tonight, which will give you an opportunity to network with the people that you see on the stages. So